So I want to say thanks to the taxi drivers who took me around. I want to say thanks to the bus drivers. I went to the market. I want to say thanks to the market vendors. I have, um, indulged in some treats in Belize at the bakeries. I want to say thanks to the people in the bakery, the fruit vendors who, supplied fruits, to the brother I met at Gales Point, Manatee, to Rolando and Giovanni. We went to a sister at a library out in an area. I think it was I don't remember the district, but to the sister at the library. I wanted to say
1
also
second. It's Sister Danisha from Hopkins Library.
Hopkins Library, right? Yeah, Hopkins Village Library, right? I also want to thank Sister Christy of XTV and her baby girl, Thirsty, and all the people who made my stay in Belize a wonderful stay. I also went to, and I don't want to mispronounce the name, Zonantanich, I think it was, Zonantanich at the pyramids there, and I met people there, family I met there actually, and wonderful experience, great conversations with all of those people. So I want to say thanks to the people of Belize who made my stay in Belize a wonderful stay up to this point in time. My talk today will be brief because I prefer to have a conversation, a dialogue, rather than a monologue, so we can get to talk to each other and ask questions. But what I will present will be around three stories. One, and I think since this is Emancipation Day, storytelling has always been part of the tradition of Africans and other people of color. So I will begin with, I will talk through three stories today. One story would be a story titled The Chicken and the Eagle. Another one about a bed. And the third one about a wolf and a dog. So those will be the stories through which I will try to convey the message of emancipation today. The reality for us in the Caribbean, and even though Belize is in South America, in Central America, sorry, the reality for us in Central America and the Caribbean is that we have questions of identity and about who we are. That's a big, big question for us. We sometimes ask ourselves, and we have these debates, and when I was on the radio, I was listening to some of the questions people were asking, and there are always issues of identity in the Caribbean, who we are. And part of the reason we ask those questions and part of the reason we are confused about who we are is because of the historical process that has shaped us. There are those who believe that because the so-called slavery was 100, 200 years ago, that it does not impact us. Yes, it does. It impacts us so much that even medically, there are consequences that we suffer today. And one example of this is a study that was done through the Reparations organization out of UWI in Barbados by Hilary Beckles. And it has to do with the high level of what you call hypertension, or what we call blood pressure in the Caribbean. And one of the discoveries that was made was that the what is called a high blood pressure medicine that is used in the Caribbean, somehow it doesn't seem to work on people of African descent in the Caribbean and those of African descent in the United States. It works on Europeans, it works on Africans on the continent, but it seems that whenever we take those medicines, the doses even have to be increased on and on for it to be effective. And what the research has shown is that the experiences of the plantation impacted us physically, biologically. And so if those experiences impacted us biologically, it means that it would affect us mentally. In other words, it is transmitted from generation to generation. And so this theme today, free your mind, is a very, very important question. We ask ourselves, what is the mind? Is the mind something physical? No, it is not. It is not something you can hold like your heart or your brain. But we know the mind exists. And if something exists, it can be influenced. And this is part of our experiences in the Caribbean. We have been influenced in ways of thinking and in ways of doing things because we have been impacted by ways of thinking. You know, the story I'm going to tell you is a story out of Africa. And it relates to how you think and how what you think impacts you. It's a story Kwame Nkrumah would tell his people on the verge of independence in Ghana. It is a story about an eagle and a chicken. And the story is that a chicken farmer one day was walking through the woods, and so he saw this young eagle who could not fly. And he brought the eagle to his home and raised this eagle among the chickens. So one day a stranger came to the village and saw this eagle. And the stranger said, well, this looks like an eagle. And the farmer said, well, no, that's really a chicken. Even though he looks like an eagle, he's a chicken because he grew up among chickens. Because he eating corn and whatever. And scratching the ground. So the stranger insisted, look, this is an eagle. The farmer said, no, this is not an eagle. He only looks like an eagle. Maybe a born eagle, but he's a chicken. And so this farmer wanted to, this stranger wanted to disprove the farmer and prove him wrong. So he said, I can prove to this bird that he is an eagle. Farmer said, well, you could go and try. So the stranger decided to try. The eagle would not move. He would not fly. Took him one day out to the forest and said, you an eagle fly. The eagle would not fly. And he continued to coax the eagle. And one day took him to the edge of a mountain, spoke to the eagle and said, you're an eagle, you must fly. And dropped the eagle off the mountain. And at that point in time, based on the circumstances of the farmer convincing and coaxing the eagle began to fly. And on that day, the eagle realized that he was an eagle and not a chicken. And that story is a kind of metaphor for our people in the Caribbean. We believe we are chickens. We believe we are everything else except who we are. And our struggle, and especially on days like this, we must remember that we are eagles and that we are not chickens. That we have the ability to soar, to fly, to achieve great things, but we must convince ourselves of that. And to convince ourselves, we have to believe in who we are. Part of our problem is that we don't believe in who we are. In my own country, in Trinidad and Tobago, up to about 43.5% of the population are people of African descent. But in my opinion, there are only 5% who are Africans. And I'll tell you why I say that. The majority of people of African descent in Trinidad, they could be as what we call as dark as the midnight. You will see a person as dark as the midnight. And you say you're an African, they will tell you, no, I mix with Chinese, I mix with Spanish. Supposed to begin, Spanish is not an ethnicity, it's a language. But they tell you they mix with Spanish. And they will tell you about every single mixture they have in their genes, except that they are Africans. You know? So I like to say that being African is a political definition and not an ethnic or cultural definition. On the other hand, we have an Indian population. And no matter what religious or other denomination an Indian person belongs to. Some of them are Presbyterians, some of them are Hindus, some of them are Muslims, some of them are atheists. When you ask them to tell who they are, they readily identify with their ethnic heritage. There is no ambiguity about who they are. And that is a problem in many other parts of the Caribbean. That is why I use the metaphor of the eagle and the chicken. We believe we are something that we are not. And therefore, because we think that way, we are unable to fulfill our potential as a people. This is why we are so divided as a people. We are unable to sometimes organize ourselves around our own self-interest, because too many times we believe that our self-interest is not what we should pursue because we are so conflicted. And so this story Kwame Nkrumah told his people in Ghana prior to independence was to prepare them to lead their country, because the British convinced many Ghanaians that they were no good. They were not even Africans in some cases. They called themselves Negroes. They identified with their tribal origin, and they never identified with the nation of Ghana in terms of understanding that it must be an agenda that you pursue to build a nation. We in the Caribbean must understand that identity is important, and that who we are is important to what we become and what we must build as a people in the Caribbean. So this is why I began by telling you about this story of the chicken and the eagle. We have to choose to be eagles and not to be chickens. We have to choose to be Africans. And it is not that in some instances we are not mixed. Because of our peculiar historical experiences, some of us are mixed. We are mixed. But the problem is, or the issue is, that we have an African identity. And on days like these, it is for us to honor the memory of our African ancestors. I like to say it is not denying any part of yourself, but it is recognizing an important part of yourself. At the end of it all, we are human beings. Yes, we are human beings. But so as in the forest there are trees of different types, in the human universe there are humans of different ethnicity and different cultures. And we are people of African descent and must recognize that if we are to move forward as a people. It is not enough for us to come on days like these and celebrate and observe. Emancipation must become a continuous issue in our lives. It must be a daily activity. Being African is not a one-day activity. We have to be consistent. We have to embrace who we are. We have to learn our traditions and teach our children those traditions. In too many instances in the Caribbean, we have embraced issues of modernization or ideas of modernization that makes us believe that what we are and who we are not valid. In other words, we give up things that sometimes for hundreds of years kept us alive, kept us healthy. And in the pursuit of this modernization, we give up important things. So the thing is, we have to understand clearly at all times who we are. This has to do with an embrace of our culture. This has to do with a transformation of our psychology, what I have to call the decolonization of the mind. This is why when I saw the theme, Free Your Mind, I understood clearly why that theme was chosen. But what does free your mind mean in real terms? I saw a documentary a few years ago by featuring the former president of Mozambique, Samora Machel. And there was a very popular slogan in Mozambique during the struggle against the Portuguese. And the slogan was "A luta continua." And "A luta continua" meant the struggle continues. So there's a slogan, if you listen to Maria Wakiba, there's a song she sang called "A luta continua." It means the struggle continues. So Samora Machel was speaking to a large audience. And he said, "A luta continua." And the people responded, "A luta continua." Continue. And he said it 3 times. And then he asked them, "A luta continua against what?" And nobody could answer. And then he said, "A luta continua against poverty, against the abuse of women, against disrespect, against disunity." And so this is the question I ask. Free our minds from what? What are we freeing our minds from? Do we even understand that there is a need to free our minds? And if there is a need to free our minds, what are we freeing our minds from? And this brings me to the second story I'm going to tell you about. I told you a story about a bed. And it's a story of an ancient myth about what is called a Procrustean bed. There's an individual, I think, in Greek philosophy called Procrustes, who was a bandit and a thief, but he was also an innkeeper. And so when strangers came to a particular town, he would invite you to come to stay at his inn, but he had a bed. And when you came into that inn, if your legs were too long, he cut it off to fit the bed. If your legs were too short, he stretched you to fit the bed. So it is called the Procrustean bed. It is a metaphor for one size fit all, but it's also a metaphor for our institutions in the Caribbean. We talk about parliamentary democracy and all of these high-sounding things. And what these things are, they are like the Procrustean bed, because they were enforced upon us without taking into consideration our peculiar identities, our peculiar cultures and geographies in the Caribbean. And today, part of the process of decolonizing the mind or freeing the mind is to understand the trap of these institutions that we have, that I liken to the Procrustean bed. Our institutions of learning, our institutions of politics, our institutions of economics. We live in we live on an economic system that is purely exploitative. It is called capitalism, but we are afraid to use that word because somebody convinced us that the opposite of capitalism is socialism, and to say the word socialism is a bad thing. And so we live under this system, exploited, having what I call JOB. Where I live in the US, we call it just over broke. And in most instances, when you have a job, that's what you are. You are just over broke. Because we have an economic system that caters to a minority in our societies. And the majority get the trickle from the table. In fact, the revolution that I was part of was called the Black Power Revolution in 1970. We had a slogan that we used a lot to describe what we wanted from our society. We said we wanted the whole bread and not the crumbs. And what we have are the crumbs. But we are convinced that it is the only way economics works. And we have to reconsider these things. We have to free our minds from orthodoxy, from ideas that confines us to what I call the mentality of the Procrustean bed. That there is not a one-size-fits-all. That we have to have the intellectual courage and character to challenge all ideas about how we live and consider ideas that may even be frightening to us at points in time. I mean, if you look at what is happening in the Sahel right now, it's a wonderful experiment in which These three leaders are exploring all kinds of ideas of politics, of economics, of social organization, of economic organization, of political organization. And one of the things that they are pursuing right now, one of the things they are discussing is whether they need this so-called idea of democracy. We have a so-called democracy in all parts of the Caribbean, a parliamentary democracy. And how do these politicians respond to us? Do we really feel that we are part of our society? Do we really feel that the decisions that are made impact us? It doesn't. Yet they tell us that we can participate in this process. You know, as one writer said, when the French people stormed the Bastille in the French Revolution, they were fighting for the right to participate, and what they got was the right to vote. And we in the Caribbean, we confuse sometimes the right to vote with the right to participate. We do not participate in the political process. We do not participate in our economic processes. In other words, we are not fully democratic. This is why I use the word liberation as the pursuit from emancipation to liberation. We have to understand that the historical processes that impose these institutions on us were never meant to make us participate in any of these institutions. We have, really in the sense of the word, is a representative democracy and not a parliamentary and not a participatory democracy, sorry. So the idea and the story I told you about the Procrustean bed, it is a one-size-fits-all institutions that were imposed on us and institutions that we have to challenge. And this is why Bob Marley in his famous song said, the only solution is a revolution. That is another word that we are also careful of. So we have to move beyond what we are comfortable with and embrace ideas that sometimes we are not comfortable with. And the last story I'm going to tell you about before we move for questions is a story about a dog and a wolf. And this story is really about self-determination. And the story goes that there was a tired wolf walking through the forest. And one day he came across a nice area and he saw, he smelled some lovely food. So he decided, he was tired of scrapping and fighting for food because he was old. And so he decided to follow the scent of the food. And when he followed the scent of the food, he arrived at a place where he saw a nice house with a nice lawn and nice yard. And he saw this dog guarding the yard and walking around and so on. So the wolf approached the dog and he said, I'm really hungry and you are so well fed and you look so clean and, so tell me, how are you so clean? Look, I am rough and I haven't eaten in days. And the dog said, well, I just chase some squirrels, chase a few people, and my master takes care of me. My master clean me, bathe me, treat me well. So the dog said, the wolf said, so what you want to do for your master to take care of you? The dog said, well, all I do, look, as I told you, I chase some squirrels, I chase some people and so on. And the wolf said, that's all you have to do? He said, yeah. He said, come, let me introduce you to my master. So as the dog was taking the wolf to the master, the wolf saw a collar around the dog's neck. So the wolf asked the dog, what is that for? And the dog said, sometimes my master chains me, and just, he chains me, he likes me, so he chains me. And as soon as the wolf saw that, the wolf left. He said, I prefer to be a hungry wolf than to be a chained dog. That is self-determination. Too many of us prepare to be chained dogs and not independent wolves. As Africans, we are afraid to get into business. We're always scared about everything. We're always fearful. So the lesson of the dog and the wolf is that there are times when you will prepare to be hungry in order to be free. In other words, it is better to be a hungry wolf than to be a chained dog. And those are the three stories I would tell. And that is a story of self-determination. We have to understand that our lives are in our hands. And what we do and what we achieve is based on how well we are prepared to accept responsibilities for our own action and not be prepared to be tied to anybody's destiny or to anybody's idea of who we must be and what we must be and what we must accomplish. And on that note, I will end and open for questions and a conversation.
Big thanks, Brother Akamoto. Big thanks. Okay, we have a mic. I see Sister Kebe have a hand up. So pass the mic wrong to Sister Kebe, please. I want to engage now. This is our reasoning. Okay, I'm referring to the last story about the dog and the wolf. And I think there are a lot of people that I know who really want to have their own business. But the powers that be, namely the system, put so many things in their way. For example, they have people who just have a small bank account, they're saving every week, and they think, oh, when I get so much money, I can go to the bank and get a loan. And they go to the bank, and of course, what they have there is not enough. And then the bank doesn't try to even give them ways of working more so they can get more money. The system, I think, here, and not only in Belize, but the system works against a lot of people who are looking for self-determination, and I know quite a few people, okay? And so you feel stuck. You go to the bank to get a loan, to start a business, and fill out all the paperwork, and they check you didn't go to jail or whatever. And at the end of the day, you don't get the loan because maybe you don't know anybody who works there, and that's, I think, just what I see from my point of view.
Okay, so Sister Kebe, you lived in the US, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Briefly.
I lived in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
The early Caribbean people who went to Brooklyn, a lot of them were illegal. But yet they bought houses.
I agree.
So real estate people will tell you, a Trinidadian or a Belizean or whatever, Jamaican, they'll go and buy a house and they'll come with a bag of money in their hand. You know what that is from? Susu.
Mm-hmm.
You know what that susu is?
Yeah,
we have susu in Belize? Exactly. So some of the early, and this is the point I'm making about one size fit all and our tradition. The susu is a tradition that we have had for a long time in the Caribbean. Right? And so
syndicate.
Syndicate, right. In some parts of the Caribbean called box, Lenan, it have different names, right? We have systems in our heritage and our culture that allows us to do these things. So they will tell you in Brooklyn and parts of New York, there was cash and they used to wonder how you get this cash. You're running susu. We have to return to the ways of our ancestors to solve some of these problems. And that is exactly the point I'm making. We have been schooled to believe that we either have to go to the bank, right? Even if you look at the credit union and the cooperative movement, the friendly societies. When I was a child, my grandfather was part of a friendly society. I am sure they had them in Belize. The friendly societies did two things for you. When you died, they made sure you got a good burial. And if you had some difficulties, they made sure you got some money. And the friendly societies were the forerunners to the cooperative, which is the credit union. So we have institutions that we have forgotten because we believe that the banks are the only place we can go to get finances. I am part of the credit union in my community in Trinidad. Right? It's a 40-year-old credit union. Right? And we have over $500 million in assets from regular people. Right? We lend monies to people. Right? And one of the things people don't understand about the cooperative movement of the credit unions, it is that it is owned by the community. Now, a lot of these so-called, what I call them, these bourgeois and educated people, have infiltrated the movement, and they try to take it away from the working class people and turn it into a bank. Right? But we have to hold on to those institutions, because those are the institutions that supported us for years, gave us homes, educated our children. And unfortunately, we have not developed these institutions in the way that they should be developed. And again, because of modernization, in fact, the friendly societies, most of them have died. They don't even exist anymore. But we still have cooperatives and credit unions. So we have to look at, in our history, what saved us at a particular point and see how that can serve us again.
Yes, morning, brethren. I like your stories, right? I like the one like fly like an eagle. I don't know if I could still fly because I'm 65 right now. I don't know if I could fly to the mountain top. And the next one, the wolf where they chain up. Good story, because the dog, I get chain up for wrong move, but they chain me for nothing up to my torso. When I say that make I feel sad. People tell lie for you and they chain you up, and you know that feeling there. They chain you up like an animal. So the two stories they really touch me. And I really got no, I don't too old to go borrow. So I could just live by my own brains. I don't know where you're set for I do right now. Thanks, brethren.
As we know, my name is Alan Banks. That's my family name, but I liberate myself and call myself Ramadan, because I no longer believe, and from the age of 17, I'm 66 now, but I'm still young. So I liberate my mind. I used to watch a lot of things that happens to Martin Luther King, to other people in the United States specifically. And I always say, I don't want to be a part of that. And I know people say, why didn't you join the army? Why? No, I don't want to join something that will continue the oppression of my people. Or I'm going to be used as a tool to oppress my people. But referring to Barako, welcome back again. Remember I told you, if you are an African, if you are a black man, you are African. If you are in Belize, you are at home. Why are you brothers and sisters? But as the entrepreneurial system, as being self-employed, sadly I noticed for at least about 20 years, some people might remember me, I was a street smart. As Baraboko said, he was in New York, that's where I learned the word street smart. And also in Chicago. So I realized after working on a merchant marine, no need to be working for nobody that is going to exploit me and use me. I have my own brain to think. But it was sad that many of our people does not believe the same way. As a consequence, my business suffered a lot because they didn't want to support me. I remember a couple occasions I used to also be a watch repair, and some people would rather wait until the Chinese man opened to go in his store to buy the battery, have it installed or the watch buy, but they don't want to buy it from me. And I'm open before the Chinese. When the Chinese man open, I'm already there 1 hour ahead. When the Chinese man mistreat them, or the other vendors, other stores of other different people, nationality, when they mistreat them, then they come back to me. And they say, oh, brother, please, can you help me with this watch? I say, I can't help you, because I'm just like the man over there. He didn't make money, I want to make money too. So I have a family to make. No, but I didn't know that you have a watch repair business, but this is right in front of your eyes. Or you couldn't see it, or you see everything that is in the store, but you don't see my little outdoor stand. And everything is on display. But that is a part of also emancipate yourself from mental slavery, because we believe, as the brother say, we can't, because we poor, because we black, because with this and because with that. Yet in front of our eyes, other people come from different parts of the world and became millionaires. So we need to get together and collectively we uplift ourselves, just like we uplift the people that building big stores. One love.
Anybody else have any other comments? Any question? Yes, I said the sister have a hand raised. It's 10:38, so we officially have about 21 more minutes for this reasoning.
So I appreciated the story about the chicken and the eagle, but I was kind of hoping that the eagle would have eaten one of the chickens in the end. No, but I understand what you're trying to say, but looking at it analytically, you're fighting your very nature of what you are. And it doesn't matter where you grow up or who's around you, you will always have that calling in. So I was kind of hoping that, the story would be more complex in the end, but it's just a sad point that it took somebody else to point out how different you were when you, your very self, could not open your eyes to what you are. So that's my take on that story.
So let me answer that question to you. People who have been kidnapped, there's something called the Stockholm Syndrome, in which after a while the lines become blurred between your kidnapper and you. And some people even are known to fall in love with their kidnappers. So it is only after you have come out of that situation and people point out to you that that person kidnapped you, that you understand that you've been kidnapped. The process that a lot of people went through, people of African descent, they were kidnapped, tortured, beaten. There's a particular book about, I don't remember the name of the book right now, in which pregnant African women in Jamaica, the slave masters would dig a hole in the ground, the bellies of the pregnant woman in the ground to flog them. When you come out of that experience, you are traumatized and tortured, and you are tortured and traumatized, and that passes down from generation to generation. And so sometimes there is a need for an intervention in order to make you understand who you are, to understand who you are. And that was the story of the eagle and the chicken. Because if you are socialized in a certain way, you come to believe sometimes the environment in which you are socialized. That is not to say that there are not anomalies where people may, on their own volition, transform themselves. But that is not always the case. And this was the case of, for example, people of African descent. We were told, we're no good. You're a Negro. You have no history. Until someone came and said, no, there is a history. And then that opened the eyes of people to see a different reality. And for hundreds of years, this is what was told to people of African descent. And so the metaphor of the eagle and the chicken is that this was a bird who believed that he was something else, even though he was something else. And someone had to intervene to point out to him that he could fly. Being a predator was not the issue here. You understand what I'm saying? Identifying who he was the issue.
I want to trail on this story that Sister Kebe mentioned. I want to trail on Sister Kebe's story, the dog and the leash. Some of us, especially black people, we have the idea, but we cannot get it to materialize. Speaking about banks and credit union, I always say it's not who you know. People say it's who know you. It's who claim to know you. Because I can come and look for you and say, tell him it's so-and-so. I know her, but I don't want to see her today. My husband and I opened the very own business from our life savings, small business, and it grew and grew and grew. And he was murdered in that business. Robbery, took his gun, and the court, the law says insufficient evidence. I always say, people don't know what you did to get what you have, what you're doing to keep it. They just want to take it from you. And us, black people, are the ones who suffer the most. One thing I think we're failing is supporting each other. Like the gentleman said, we'll go to the Asians, the whatever nationality, and then leave our black people's business for the last. I can speak of my own experience that people whose name I won't call would go to business and want to credit when they do not have money. When they have money, they walk half a block down and go to Habit, etc., etc. Because we do not want to see our black people prosper. We need to start holding up each other. Otherwise, black people will forever go down.
Esther, you are absolutely correct. And that is a cultural question that there is a phenomenon in the US, right? They call it the hair salon phenomenon. There will be no business in this area here. And a person will come and open my hair salon. And then another black person see it and say, oh, I could do that. And they open another one say, I could do it. And then there's 10 hair salons in the area and only one could survive. It's a way we sort of disrespect each other. But that is part of the slave psychology. That's why the whole theme of this thing, free your mind. We are easy to be violent against each other because we have no sense of who we are. And this is why on days like these, it is important that we talk about who we are. Encourage people to be their better and their higher self. I have a friend who was in business in my community, didn't have a bakery. And we will always tell her, look, why don't you open my bakery? She said, I wouldn't open my bakery. She said, so I open my bakery, somebody else will open my bakery. And another sister friend of mine, she went and she opened this wonderful bakery, brought in French chefs and equipment and all of this, and built a building and started this bakery. And within about 6 months, another person started selling bread, right? The other businesses in the area, like some of the Indian-owned groceries and bakeries, from about 12, 14 miles away, who won't come into the community, guess what they did? They started to come right in that community with bread and pastry. And at the end of it all, within 3 to 4 years, her bakery was destroyed. That is part of the slave psychology, right? That is part of the understanding the difference between whether you are an eagle or a chicken. This is part of the psychology that prevents progress. And so we have to change these attitudes and develop a sense of history, a sense of change our psychology, decolonize our mind. Right? Stop this infighting, and learn to value the progress of another person. That is part of what we have to change. This is why I keep saying that the emancipation process is one thing, but we have to liberate ourselves. And then the other thing we do, we are not happy for the success of each other. We want to pull each other down. Right? So this I have a old uncle, 90 years, he always say, we're not emancipated. We're not emancipated, the uncle always said. And that's why I came up with the term, we have to be liberated. We have to free ourselves from the vestiges of slavery and colonialism. I'm sorry to hear about what happened to you, but unfortunately, that repeats itself too many times in our community.
Thanks, Brother Akko, and thanks everybody for coming out and support me. Final question. How important it is that we tell our own stories. I don't think what happened and has been happening since 2021 has ever happened before. That
So we familiar with November 19th, Garifuna Settlement Day. What is November 19th? The National Garifuna Council organized for Garifuna people. Since 2021, there's the Indigenous People Day and African Emancipation Day. Indigenous people organize for indigenous people. It is only, and I want to hear me good, it's only on African Emancipation Day that the state decide that they want to organize. So down the street at the former Governor House, which is now the House of Culture, the state have an official ceremony. The state can never speak for African descendants. The state enslaved us. And so this is the first time Belizeans and other people want to get to say what I call the colonized narrative, which is what the state have, and the decolonized narrative, which is what UBAD Educational Foundation offers. Now, UBAD, the one child of UBAD Educational Foundation, the one child of UBAD, the first Black Power organization in Belize since 1969. And so I want to pay attention to the narrative what the state give. And when we look on the people there, we see that then the talk for Black people. Most of the people, even, I remember our skin folk and our kin folk, because Black people betray Black people, as we just talked about. But most of the people want to make decision or feel that they could make decision for African descendants racialized as Black people are not Black people. And if you know, like you could look European and really identify as a Black person, but your reality one different from one melanated or dark skinned person. So we really have to start to study together. And I know I'd wait to hear the news because I understand the state should have made a big announcement today. But I want to jump the gun. I want to see if the state will make the announcement. And then I want to think for the things that we talk about today. We have to learn with stories because when we don't know it, other people tell it from a different perspective. And I really, like, when we think about the state of African people globally, if we don't organize in our best interests, we are continue to perish. I remember Africa at the cradle of civilization. So so make I give you an example. The narrative what I give we is that one Creole or one mixed person, and we run with it. We sing the Sankey. We believe it. Yet when evidence is provided that that is not the only narrative, we have a hard time accepting it. And so the word Creole come from the Spanish word criollo, and we mean one person was born outside of their motherland. So if you never born in Spain or you never born in Portugal, then you're born outside of your motherland. The same thing for African people. So a Creole was an African person who was born on the continent of Africa. But because we so ingrained and want to be the European, but I said not because we don't have a mixture, but that we really understand who we are. And it's not easy to accept it, Brother Akko. Right now it's 10:51. We only have 9 minutes and the rest of food up on the way. So we just want to really again acknowledge everybody will come. We have 9 minutes. We have to lock up in a 9 minutes. Brother Akko, I see you have your hand raised, Brother Ramadan. You have like 1 minute. Pass the mic to the brother, please.
Let me say one other thing too, Sister. The Creole was also a European born in the Americas. Yeah.
That's what I was saying. It originally came from the Portuguese and the Spaniards. It means that they never banned from the homeland of Spain or Portugal. So anywhere where they banned other than the homeland, they were Creole. So the same thing applies for any other group of people. Africans, and that historically documented. In fact, okay, I tell you now, I like side sources. The formation of a colonial society, Belize from conquest to conquer, Nigel Boland, on page 50. I just want to quote this out and know that I'm not to make up nothing. Unfortunately, the 18th century records do not provide any indication of the proportion of imported enslaved who were West Indian Creoles or African born. So I want to let fire, especially the people that were identified as Creole, to know that your nationality is the place where you were born. Your nationality could be part of your identity, but not because you could be unbelievable. Like we would say we're African Belizeans. What do they what do the Indians say in Trinidad? How do they define themselves? In the lead with the country of origin. All right, go ahead, Brother Ramadan. You have something to say?
Yes, greetings again. I was very fortunate to be bilingual because I had two sides of the slave master's blood. One from the British or the English, and the other one from the Spanish. So to teach my people, but some of them probably like the Spanish language, the double L in Spanish is pronounced as Y. So you say criollo. No. In Chicago, I learned, as from Mutabaruka in Jamaica, the innocent and the fool can pass for two, but yes, they have something in common. The innocent check things out, but the fool, yo. As Mutabaruka said, and the brother in Chicago, Abdullah Muhammad, he also tells us, if you know that you don't know, you are good to go. But if you don't know that you don't know, that's where we are in the situation, because we don't know that we don't know, and we still don't want to know. But the other brother say, if you know that you don't know, then you seek things for yourself. Search your history, it will show. Happy emancipation, brothers and sisters.
We have 6 minutes. So anybody will hold the mic, you got a minute, 2 minutes max.
I just want to say
more than that.
one other thing about the term Creole. A lot of writers suggested that when Simon Bolivar led the revolution in Venezuela that freed all of South America, part of the motivation for his rebellion was when he went to Spain, he was discriminated against. So even though he was a European born in the Americas in Venezuela, when he went to Spain, they looked down upon him because he was not born in Europe. You see? And so that is what incensed him to some extent to return to the Americas and launch the revolution that freed all of South America. So the term Creole initially was really used to describe a white person who was not born in Europe, and then it was later applied to people of color.
Yes. I just want to say emancipation really means, to I and I in a sense, is liberation, reparation, repatriation. See? Means return to indigenous self. Haile Selassie say agriculture is the backbone of a nation, and Belize have lot of land. I want to get to the point. And agriculture could take we and the children out of poverty. Because Belize was a leading country in agriculture in Central America in the 1920s. So we want to return to that. So one point Granny was living on acres of land. Them grow their food, sew their clothes, and sing their own song. They taught us bush medicine and how to till the soil. They even taught us how to make wool and coconut oil. You see? So, it's an honor to live in our African roots and culture. Turn your back on your roots, children, and you're bound to suffer. Little children, don't get caught up in their technology. Stick to your ancestry, strengthen spirituality. Our heritage and culture is Rasta knowledge. And we're going to defend it with lots of courage. Rasta tradition is not a religion, so no need to depend on preachers and politicians. We could get up and be independent of people, because the land is right there, the earth is the Lord and the fullness therein, people. Blessed be. Thank you very much.
Respect, brother, respect. Final thoughts, brother Akko. I think we have, the time is currently 10:57, so you have 3 minutes to close out, brother Akko.
I again want to thank everyone for being here and for asking the questions that you asked. And I hope that as we move forward, we learn the lessons of our ancestors, and that history becomes an important learning tool in our lives. I always like to say that history is not just an abstract subject. It should be an applied science. And we must apply history to our daily lives in order for us to learn how we can move forward. There can be no moving forward without an understanding of the past. It is so in life, it is so in medicine. If you are a good doctor, always wants to do a medical history. What happened to your family background? So it's important that we understand the value of history as we move forward.
Big thanks. It's 10:58, so I have to recognize with community partners. More than anything, I have to thank the people who are show up and are consistent with showing up over the past 12 years. And it's really important that as African descendants, racialized as Black people, that we have the courage to challenge the status quo. To say to the state, you do not have the right to speak for us. So, if I'm a sister away from Mango Creek, you make it nothing can I say. And this is to come all the way from Mango Creek. Thanks, my sister. We'll wrap up, but the rest of the food up on the way. But I want to start to pay, when you hear me good enough, pay attention to the people who want to start to come forward. We say that then the talk for we. It can't just be my voice. We don't have to come forward and say, who are the people we're going to find for other communities, credible and could talk for honor. But if Uno not said nothing, when the state start to push people down for we throat, for talk to we, then that we want tech. And the lived experience has shown us that the state has never made good decisions, African descendants, racialized as Black people. So I propose that we start one study group after today. My number is 671-8050. 671-8050. And Uno tell me, if we don't want, we start to meet once a month at the Library of African and Indigenous Studies. And I want to talk, serious study. You have to be willing to read, to listen, to say, I never know, around. I could learn from other people. It's absolutely important. We have to close out now, Brother Ramadan. It's absolutely important. So the sponsors are Sister Elma. Okay, so more food. So listen, anybody who can hear my voice? We got more food than people. Oh, call for the food. Oh, I carry more food. Ever next high say, yeah. If you don't do nothing else, feed the people. So the bulk of my money go for food. So food they have to do vegetarian food, fried chicken, tuna, meat, yeah. Food. We got food. But I want to stay for the. I want to stay. I just want to cook or eat. But the food, we have food. I'm saying one thank with community sponsors, ICRNH, Belize Celebration Commissions, Elma Whitaker, Augustine and family, Jamila Osha, who made the flyer, the Mandela newspaper, Crumb Radio, XTV. Oh, this is our late sponsor, but a sponsor nonetheless. First time sponsor. This was new for me. The Public Utilities Commission. Late sponsor, but a partner anyway. Public Utilities Commission. Serious financial donation and give, as well as the Belize City Council. Make I put it in this way. The state have on duty for fun cultural events. I'm not calling numbers, I'm going to read. The Belize City Council gave more than the state did. The Belize City Council gave, Sister Elma Whitaker and her family gave more than the state did. I want to tell you this much. The state, and this is how I read that the intention of undermine UEF community, because we started out. They have the money coming in the state. The state actually gave UEF 4,000 Belize dollars, but the ACO ticket cost $2,000. For the hotel, but the ACO stayed at $2,000. So if we were just got the state money, we couldn't do nothing, and that's why community support is so important. Now, if we ask the state how much money they spend on organizing in our name, then I want to know how much they spend, but they spend on bag. And so I was trying to tell you, we need to learn also. Sister Kim from Kim Grab and Go, and Sister Fanny, caterers as well as vegan bites. So it's so important. Hi, sis, thanks for being here. Look at that beautiful flowers we have. Big respect. So, Haparigani.
Afrikan Emancipation.
Afrikan Emancipation.
Ghani.
Afrikan Emancipation.
Give thanks and praises. And our drummer, Raheem, Master Garifna drummer, originally from Barranco, in San Pedro. Thanks for all the time you gave with us, brother. So important as an African descendant. I want to take one official picture before we go eat. Thanks. I mean, this been out on road one day, right? Rastaman. And he said, you know what I know about card? I mean, old board carpenter. He not old board carpenter. I mean, that's a real he find old board. Look for the brother, I know. The brother skill. Another one, we have to go back and come forward. All the organized people are saying the people. Thanks.